Although I have some friends in Australia in the southern hemisphere, and they're in summer right now. Um, so that's kind of nice as well. Um, the days are longer there, although theirs are getting shorter, and
Yeah.
ours are getting longer here in the United States, in the northern hemisphere. So, all right, recording has started, so we are good. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another class in selling skills and the selling process. And as we talk about communicating, how to communicate more effectively, because if you're a good communicator, as we talk about many times, you'll be better at sales. And even if we're not in the selling profession, there are so many times we're trying to persuade someone to do somebody, to do something, persuade somebody to like us, to listen to us, right? And that's why I just love teaching this class because it's so applicable to just about everything we do. And in fact, probably there's not a day that goes by that we don't purchase something, right? So we're always then at the other side of the sales spectrum, if you will, because we're the buyers, right? And so then we can kind of see as we play with this, oh, I'm the buyer. How do I make decisions? And then as you're the seller, you can kind of see, okay, what is the buyer thinking? How do they like to be sold to? What's important to them? The nonverbals, the verbals, how you position things, the homework you do ahead of time, all that preparation, what objectives you have, all those kinds of things. And as we talk a little bit about last time, we talk about positioning. And so I'm going to finish up this last, well, there's two sections of chapter 9, um, getting into this uh, building value as we talk about being a better presenter of the information. So if you remember, kind of like we had a bunch of classes in terms of generating leads. What is a prospect? How do we communicate non-verbally, listening? Um, how to be adaptive in selling, changing our style based on the style of the person we're talking to. And so it comes down to eventually we're in the sales call, right? So we talked a lot about that last week. What do we do when we're actually in the physical call? How do we communicate? How do we break the ice, right? How do we position what we're going to talk about? How do we check to make sure they understand what we're talking about is good or not good? Kind of this checking in, right? And then how do we want to leave them? All of kind of creating this interest and creating a favorable impression. So now we've been talking a little bit about in this chapter this word value proposition, okay, for the customer. And what I want you just to kind of think about as we talk to anybody, communicating with anybody, there's always something that you want to give to you want to give. May not be a product per se, it could be a service, it could be advice, right? You want to meet their needs. You want to communicate in an effective way. You want to help the other person, not necessarily that they're broken, that they need to be fixed, but that you want to offer something of value. And that's what this proposition is. So think about as you do that, as you're communicating with the buyer, the potential customer, it's not a customer yet, or they are a customer, and you're communicating them to purchase more or purchase a different product or service, right? And so, what should we think about? Start to get in your head these ideas because this is just kind of a framing thing. Obviously, you want to talk about um, the benefits for them, right? Economical, right? If they're purchasing your product, why is it of value? And the emotional piece. The emotional piece is all about changing things up, right? And that's really important too. So as we go through this class, as we go through this section, you'll kind of start to see that this becomes really important. This emotional piece, this economic piece, And we're always trying to, we talked about the difference between last week, features and benefits, right? The features. What are the features? But more important, the benefits. How are they going to use and get value from what we're talking about? And then other pieces here in this proposition, which is just positioning. How do I position my company, not just my product, my company and the people that support me to value the prospect in a long-term way? Okay, so that's another piece. And then understand that obviously we're offering the person we're talking to, the buyer, the potential customer, the prospect, the our boss or a colleague, we're offering them us as a personal problem solver. This is kind of a nice mindset. We're there to help them solve problems. So they look at us as like a very good resource. And if we do a good job, we have clear information to present, we have solid information, we can create this value proposition. And that's what we want to do. We want to create this value in the prospect's mind, in the customer's mind, that we're helpful, we're of service, we can be a problem solver. And then the really wonderful thing is that engages them, and that engages them in a very positive way. Whoever it is we're talking to, could be a group, could be a single person, could be somebody in our family, it could be a friend, a colleague, um, somebody who we're doing business with in whatever capacity. So we kind of always think about, again, what's going on in the prospect customer's mind, and how do we position ourselves in the best possible way? That's kind of what this cost benefit analysis is. Everybody's kind of thinking, what do I get out of this interaction? Right? Maybe they don't think in the foreground of their mind, but it's always in the background. Why are they talking to me? What is it they want? And you want to make sure you're presenting things clearly, because a lot of times people's perceptions are that, oh, they're trying to sell me something. They have, you know, maybe they don't have my best interests at heart. But obviously you that's an objection, and you can work with that, and we'll talk about that in the next uh, chapter a lot, dealing with objections. And just start to think about some of these things. We're not going to spend too much time on it, but just kind of get your mindset flowing in this particular way. So, buyer wants to know the cost to the buyer, right? Basic things, cost benefit. My product, my service costs X. Here's the value I'm going to deliver. Very simple. You pay this, you get this. Okay. There's obviously layers to that. And the next one is sort of this comparative cost benefit analysis, where you compare, okay, here's what the current situation is with the buyer. You've been using this service before, you've had these issues. So there's a layer that's deeper than just here's my product, here's how much it costs, here's what it does. You have to, this comparative piece is like, what's going on right now? Maybe they're mired, this company you're selling to, this person you're talking to is mired in a really difficult, um, challenging situation. So you take that into account, because that might change the complexity, and it might help you. It might also hinder how you're um, connecting in the very beginning. Like I said, remember, if the person you're talking to has just had a difficult situation at home, or dealing with another salesperson, and they bring that baggage to you and the conversation. So they're already irritable, and they're talking to you, and you're trying to have a conversation with them, and they're really short. You need to know that, right? It's kind of like this, again, checking in that emotional intelligence piece that we talk about. What's going on inside their head? And obviously, we don't want to make too many assumptions, but if we have some information, maybe we've already dealt with them before, and we can kind of get this intuitive sense of something's not right here. And depending on their personality style, driver, expressive, an expressive might want to talk about what's going on. A driver wouldn't never give you that emotional layer of what's happening in their mind unless it directly pertains to the bottom line, right? So you kind of have to get a sense here, and this is the skill of what we're doing. Um, some other pieces just to kind of consider in terms of as we look at the selling process, what is the buyer going to be focused on? What does the person I'm talking to really want? Return on investment. We've probably all heard that ROI. And it's not always just money, okay? A lot of it is time. If I give my time to talk to you, salesperson, am I going to get value? Not necessarily just the product or service, but are you going to help me deal with my problems? And so that could be part of the return on investment. So people are always kind of, again, if it's not directly in the forefront of their mind, it's always sort of to the side. It's important, right? Casual relationship, friendships, always looking, okay, what am I going to get out of this? But in the background, you're there with them because they're a fun person to hang out with. You enjoy their company. There are people that you probably know that are difficult people to deal with. And it's what's the return there? Well, maybe your ability to get your communication enhanced by dealing with difficult people. That's a skill that anybody in the world, in the workplace, needs to get good at dealing with difficult people. I tell this to my kids all the time. They have an instructor, they have a boss, they have somebody that's difficult. You need to navigate that. You need to learn how to be skilled in persuading that person. Everybody is not always easy to deal with, right? That's reality, that's life. Okay. So, other things to think about here as we talk about um, building value to the customer. And so, part of it, if you think about payback period, they might be thinking about, okay, so say I bring your service, your software into my company, and I'm going to have to spend $100,000. How long does it take for me to get my money's worth? Okay, so they're thinking in that layer. At least somebody in that company is thinking about that. And so we need to just have a sense of, okay, maybe they're going to ask about this payback period, right? So it could get pretty sophisticated. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. That's when you cover your classes in accounting and finance in this MBA program, they'll deal with all that stuff. We're not going to get into the weeds there. But just to kind of have a sense of what's going on. And then we think about, okay, net present value. Again, it's not a finance class, but just to sense what they're thinking about. I'm spending $100,000 for the software now. You said, seller, that this product is going to, over the long term, save me money because it's going to be able to handle more of my company's um, processes. And so I won't have to spend as much time. We won't have as many issues that we'll have to deal with later on. And so there is a present value to that proposition, meaning that 2 years of problems brought into right now, 2 years of problems that you don't have to deal with, that has a value. And so when you talk about your price or your service or your consulting, whatever it is you're dealing with, think about if you're offering a value that could save the other person time later on, that has a value. It has a value right now that's more than just paying $100,000. That might be worth to them $300,000 of value. And so, again, if you start to think about advice, insight that you can give, you have to find a way to let the other person see all that value. And that's what we're talking about here. The other piece, and this is, for those when you start taking economics, opportunity cost. there's a cost for them to do business with you, because that means that they can't do business with other people, maybe in the same way. They're giving you money, they're giving you their time, and maybe they have multiple vendors that they use to supply their needs, but they're still giving you a portion of the pie. So we need to think about what is the opportunity cost that they have to deal with you. Kind of in the back of your mind, always think about that. And successful salespeople identify those opportunities that they might be able to, again, to have by dealing with you. And if you make their job easier, then that means that they might not have to deal with as many problems and issues that come up. So always think about, again, the book uses this in terms of financial costs. I want you to think about it as also time cost, dealing with difficult problems later on. So there's like the cost of not having to deal with headaches. I mentioned this example a couple of classes ago, but tax season is coming up here in the United States, and probably where you are, if you're a business owner, you're an individual, you got to pay taxes. We make money, right? So I can do my own taxes, or there's a lot of complexity there. Sometimes I hire somebody to prepare my taxes for me, because the cost, the opportunity cost, not just the physical money, but the opportunity cost, the 25 hours that I would need to spend to do my tax returns is not worth it, because I could be doing something else. So I'd rather hire somebody to do that work for me, because it's not just 25 hours of my time, it's also the research I have to do to find, maybe another 5 hours to find the forms, the correct forms, print everything out in the right way, send them in, make sure everything is correct. That's what we hire people for, that, right? In your own life, you've hired people, whether you hire somebody to cook you a meal when you go to a restaurant, or you hire somebody like Windsor University to offer you a degree so you can learn these classes, these skills. You're offering your money to somebody else. What is the opportunity cost there? Obviously, you could try to learn all these classes yourself, but I think it becomes more difficult. We're working people, most of us, right? And so this whole program is based on, because I'm working, I need somebody to help organize this information for me. Because, yeah, you can buy Castleberry's book for yourself and just read it. Are you going to get as much out of it as taking this class? Most certainly not. That's why you're here. So there's an opportunity cost to dealing with most of those things. So let's kind of talk. I'm going to skip through the inventory pieces to just kind of talk about this piece. Okay. Um, we're making a presentation. I think this is important, so I'm going to spend a little more time on it. Then we'll get into the next chapter about dealing with objections. How do we reduce jitters, right? Jitters, anxiety, tension, stress. It could be we're in a sales situation. It could be we're talking to a colleague. It could be we're talking to our boss, or it could be talking to somebody else in our business that we don't directly work with, but we know that, wow, they're the higher up person. Or maybe we're competing in an athletic event and we're a little nervous, or we're getting ready to meet somebody new who we haven't met before, or even we just went to IKEA and bought I don't know, a desk, and you open up the instructions. This might have happened to somebody here. I'm sure it's happened to me. You open up the instructions and you're like, I thought this was easy to put together. Why is this instruction book in 27 pages? And there's 83 steps I have to do. I literally put together a dresser drawer for my older son. The manual was like this thick. Okay, you can kind of see that. And it was like, I start to get a little bit nervous. I'm like, how many hours is this going to take? Do I have enough time? Do I have the right tools? So there's a way to deal with that anxiety, those jitters, that can help you. And certainly, talking about sales and the selling process, right? So if you are in sales, you're going to talk to a customer, a potential customer, a prospect, somebody you've worked with before, somebody you've never met, right? We get nervous. That's human nature. So some things to think about here. Know the audience well. In a way, we talked about this when we talked about doing your homework of finding out all you can about who it is you're talking to, right? If it's somebody new, you can go on the internet, the social media. You can, if you're introduced to them, never met them, you might have the person that introduced you. You go to them, get to know what might their social style be. Might they be a driver? Might you know what is their business like? Right? They might be in a business that's very much full of drivers. And so you can kind of get a sense of, oh, yeah, I need to present the facts really well. Um, Next one is pretty basic. And this is about preparation. Know what you're talking about. Don't wing it, right? Sometimes we can wing it and do okay. We're professionals. We want to prepare. So you need to know what you're talking about, your product, your service, your consulting package, your you have advice for another outside of sales, we'll say, and you give an advice. Got to know what you're talking about. You've talked to people, because I know I have, where they think they know what they're talking about, but they're so confusing to deal with. By the time you finish with them, you're more confused, and you're like, I don't think they know what they're talking about. It's like they're just spouting off facts that make no sense. Every once in a while, you might deal with that kind of person. And so it kind of comes back. Hopefully, we're not like that, but sometimes we could be if we're not prepared. So prepare. And how do we prepare when we're making a presentation? We talked a little bit about the visuals, right? And how to create some of those visuals. We went through that earlier. And here's the thing, too. Sometimes the most powerful thing of, it says be yourself here. Sometimes the most powerful way to enhance our cognitive abilities, our brain functioning, the ability for us to do a good job presenting is to get a good night's sleep. In terms of an athlete and recovery, that is the number one recovery tool is sleep. We all know this. And you can function okay on a decent amount of sleep. But a couple of days of not getting sleep, and hopefully, we're not having to go through that, but we kind of know sometimes we're sick, sometimes we have a pain, an ailment, sometimes there's worries, can't get enough sleep. So, how does that impact what we have to do the next day, the next moment? Makes it hard sometimes. If we can go to bed a little bit earlier, knowing we have a presentation in the morning. My wife is always doing that. I'm doing that. Okay, I got a busy day tomorrow. There's some important things. Can I go to bed a little bit earlier? Or can I get everything ready to go to sleep at the regular time, but have it in a way to kind of make that night's sleep really sound? Right? So I kind of look at that. I want you also kind of think about this. If you're presenting to groups, there's an energy. I think Winnie last week you mentioned it's like you got to read the room, the energy in the room. That's important. If you're presenting to a group, you could feed off that. There could be certain people that are enthusiastic about you and your product and your service. Tune into those people. That energy could spill over, and it will spill over into the other people. Now, keep in mind, the opposite is true too. If you tune into those people that are more negative, more challenging in a group setting, and that's where you focus, then you're bringing more of that energy in. Not saying to avoid those people. I'm saying be careful where you put your energy and know that you can feed off good energy. And we sort of kind of that negative energy sometimes spills over. So we have to be careful. You've been in group settings before. I'm sure everybody here has. There's one person that's complaining all the time. How does that change the energy in the room or in the restaurant that you have friends with or wherever you're at, right? It brings people down. That's heavy. So we want to it's like look for, remember, I think I said this to you when I'm doing a presentation. I look for the kind eyeballs, those smiling people in the audience. And I tune into that. That helps me. That helps me prepare. That helps me kind of be a little bit more engaged, more lively. Other things you can think about. I put a few things in here, some extra things, but recognize if we get nervous, that's a normal process of the body. That's normal. That's saying that what I'm about to do is important. That's a big deal. This is a big deal. So we kind of like feel it in our body, but that's normal. It's like an activating response. And so if we can kind of tune like, oh yeah, our body's going to get a little bit tight and tense. Let me breathe through that. Let me make sure I exhale fully. Okay. You could do a couple of other mental tricks, kind of visualize the audience as friends, even if they're nobody that you know. Imagine that they are. Imagine, and I had a professor at university tell me this a long time ago. I'll share this with you. It just popped in my head, but I think it's important. Most of the time, I say 99% of the time, 99% of the people in the audience, they want you to succeed. They want you to do well. They don't want to see you fail miserably and bore them to death. They want you to do a good job. They do. There's always that 1%. Okay, I'm going to leave that in there. So it's 99%. But 99% of the people want you to do well. So if you think about that in that audience, or when you're talking, you're making a presentation to a group of buyers, or you're interviewing for a job, they want you to do well. They don't want to see you just fail miserably, right? Again, the 1% might, but the 99 don't. And so how you can help that too is think about similar times that you did really well in a setting, successes, previous successes. That could be really powerful. Those times that you did well and how you did it. And you kind of think about that. This is work ahead of time. This is preparation ahead of time. It's not like you walk into the presentation and then you use these skills, other than the breathing, right? You could do a few things in the moment, but the piece about being prepared is so critical, really. I mean, being prepared is also, right? We talk about getting sleep, but practice. I used to give a lot of speeches, and I would practice in front of a mirror, literally, and I would record myself. It's much easier to do now than it used to be. I used to have it before phones had cameras so easily. I used to set up a tripod with a camera and video myself. Where are my hands? How am I smiling? Where am I looking at? Right? How am I the vocal tone? Am I clear with my words? Am my facial expressions showing that I'm uncomfortable talking about this? I need to know that. I need to get good at that. You can rehearse in the shower, you can rehearse while you're, driving, hopefully not too much, right? But sometimes I do. We think about other things. Now I teach mindfulness, so I don't want you to do too many things while you're doing something like driving, right? Because we need to be focused on the road. But we could, in our mind's eye, talk to ourselves about our presentation. Okay, what are the main things? What am I going to say? What's most important? Now I know they're hot buttons. I want to make sure that I have a really good story about a successful sale that I did. I'd like to bring that in there. Keeping in mind what is most important to the other people, right? So the last couple of things I have in here are little tools of mindfulness. Be where your feet are. If we're getting really nervous and we're thinking about, oh my God, I don't know if it's going to do well. I should have had this with me. I didn't prepare enough. The brain can go into like spinning on, like walking on ice, or the rodent in the spinning wheel, right? The mouse in the spinning wheel. One of the easiest things to kind of do to get grounded, to just kind of like feel I'm here, to kind of disconnect from all the nervousness, is to be where your feet are. Your feet are the furthest part away from your head, where all the thinking is going. Feel your feet. Even if you're sitting, feel your feet. You could do that even now. We're sitting down. Your feet are on the ground, feel your feet. You tune into them. Feel your knees. Feel the flex of the knees. Feel your toes. Feel you got shoes on or no shoes, or socks. Feel that. As you tune into that, that quiets the mind down. That's really powerful. And then the other thing is I always say, to reduce jitters, this kind of gets back into when we visualize successes. Is there a word or a phrase that you could repeat to yourself that might help you remember that you're a good salesperson, that you're a good communicator, that you have good qualities, that you have value to offer? Is there a word or a phrase or an image that you can bring to mind? That's positive self-talk. And that clearly the research always points to, if there's a word or a phrase that you can use when you're nervous, when you're uncertain, it creates a little more certainty, creates a little bit more confidence. It gives you a little bit of a mental boost. Think about this. You're talking to yourself as if you were your own best friend. If you're talking to a friend, they're going through a difficult time, what would you say to that friend? Now, if you're going through a difficult time, meaning that you got jitters before a presentation, what would you say to yourself if you were your best friend talking to you? You're going to do great. Yeah, it's okay to be nervous, right? But you're going to do great. You're well prepared. So you might have a word that says confident. You might have a word that says smooth. You might have a word that says calm. You might have a word that says smile. Whatever word that kind of generates a feeling of you being a little more confident, you being a little more in your zone, if you will. Okay? Any questions about this? Reducing jitters? All kind of just think about this. When we're presenting to another person, whether it's sales or somewhere else, when we're offering something, we need to do a couple of things. We need to check in with ourselves. How are we doing? Am I prepared? What do I need to know going into the presentation? Maybe you can't get everything. So maybe you ask questions too, right? What are the visual aids that I need? How do I need to be prepared? Do I need to have testimonials? Am I demonstrating my product or service? Somebody calls you up and you're in the service business, and they have a problem. They'll share their screen with you sometimes, like show me what's happening if they're remote. Tell me about what's going on. So part of it is you don't know everything right before. But again, if you're good, and we talk about this, good at asking questions, good at listening, right? The different kinds of questions, we talked about that spin selling, right? There's situational questions, there's questions of, you know, getting more information out, there's the proposition type questions, right? There's closing kind of questions, open-ended, closed questions, right? You get good at that. You get good at listening. A presentation then becomes nothing more than a conversation. Think about that. Okay. All right. So let me move into the next chapter, which is chapter 10. And this one I really like because in real time, when we're talking to people, they say, I don't like that. I don't know what you're talking about. I already got somebody for that. I don't have any time to talk to you. These are all objections, right? And if we get really good at finding out these objections, we'll be really um, in a better frame of mind to deal with whomever it is we're talking to. Okay, so learning objectives are different than objections, but we're going to talk about objections. Learning objectives. Okay, so what do we want to know when buyers object to something? When they say I don't like that, right? When they have different expectations, that they have already a picture in their mind that your product is way too high price or your service is poor. Wow. And or your boss has this mindset already created that you ask way too many questions. I don't know how they got that impression, but maybe because you ask a lot of questions. So maybe they think, again, a boss, colleague, whoever, that you're taking up a lot of their time. Maybe they think you should be able to answer those questions on your own first, or some of them, and come to them for the really important things. They have expectations. People have expectations when they meet you for the first time. We talked about that, right? Making that good first impression. It's expectations. What if you spill your coffee on the desk while you're talking to somebody? They automatically, wow, right? Remember I shared that story with you, those that were here last time, being interviewed by a local newspaper reporter and had a new puppy. My dog threw up all over the floor, right? Expectation. Oh my God, what's going on here? This is a horrible situation. Or can I use that, add some humor, add in dealing with difficult things? As a speaker, I talk about using actual real life experiences. And I've used it. I even use it here right now. So start to think about that. Again, we talk about dealing with difficult customers, tough customers. Some are not going to want to see you. News for you. Right? Not everybody's going to want to see you, talk to you in a kind way. So how do we work with that? Um, Concerns or questions raised by the buyer. They might just have concern. They might just have questions. How long is your product going to last me? My current, you're buying a new car. After a year, it started to have problems. And then, so you have it for 4 years, had a lot of issues. You look for the next car, and you bring those expectations, those things to the purchase of the new car. Well, my last car had a lot of issues. I don't want another car with that has a lot of issues with, I don't know, we'll say the gear shift or the electrical or the air conditioning. So you might raise questions to the seller specifically. And so think about it. Your buyer's going to have some questions for you ahead of time. Maybe 1 out of 10 is like easy peasy, you sell them right away. You did such a good job of preparation, nothing. It doesn't mean that you're not doing a good job if somebody comes up and says, I don't like that. This doesn't sound good. That's life. And it's your job as a communicator, as this good salesperson, to deal with those objections. Okay? There's different kinds, right? We should kind of know that. Um, this, talk about attitude, right, towards the buyer. We're answer sincerely. Not gonna make stuff up. There are people that make stuff up when they don't know. If you don't know something, we talked about this in the very first class, right? You may not have all the answers, but you say, you know what, uh, buyer, I don't know that. I'm gonna find that out for you, and I'll get back to you. X amount of days, time, hours, whatever. Sometimes you can pick up the phone and call. You know what? I'm not sure. Let me call my customer service right here, right now. Right. So obviously, we don't want to argue with them, contradict ourselves, argue with them. Certainly, right? And we don't want to be like, think about this. We just talked about giving a presentation. We have presentation jitters. You might have objection jitters. Oh, I don't want to hear any objections. So I'm going to dance around things and not be a good salesperson, ask the right questions, because I don't want to find out where, these issues about my service or my product. No, welcome objections. If you do a good job of handling objections, you'll add more value than you did before you went into that call. Let me repeat that because that's really important here about sales or about dealing with anybody in terms of a presentation or a persuasion. If you get really good about handling objections, you'll add more value to the conversation. That's important. That's a mindset. If you can kind of think about, okay, it's okay to have objections. I'm talking to my kids, I'm talking to a family, and they're coming up with all kinds of ways they don't want to do what I asked them to do. If you welcome that, literally, and able to address that in a way that satisfies them, you've connected at a deeper level. That adds more value. That's powerful. That's a good salesperson. That's a good communicator. Okay. And think about this kind of the mindset, this attitude. We talk about this already a little bit, right? If we can assume the attitude of being a helper, of being a counselor, right? An advisor. That I really like, the advisor. Counselor is like, fixing the problem sometimes. It's like, but the advisor role, they then value who you are and what you have. They trust you. So if you can have the other person think of you as an advisor, a guide, obviously you're still a salesperson. You're still trying to persuade them to do something or buy something. But here's the thing. You get to this layer upon layer in their mind. If they look at you as the advisor, that builds the relationship long term. And I put it in red. That's the trust. So the more the buyer trusts you, the more they feel comfortable about raising objections. Because sometimes, if you're the salesperson, the person that doesn't want to hear, you know, the the reasons why they don't want to do what you ask. So they'll say, "Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll buy your product." And they never do. They never do what you ask. Obviously, there's something behind that. There's a layer below the surface that they're not sharing with you. And maybe they think, oh, they don't want to hear what I have to say that will maybe offend them. So I'm not going to say it. This is the buyer, and here's the seller, right? So the seller is just not going to share with them what objections they have. They can say everything is great. Yeah, I'll buy your service. Fantastic. And then you can't get them on the phone the next month. They're ghosting you. What's that about, right? They don't return your emails or calls. There were some objections there. If you uncovered those, now you have the relationship built. And again, honesty, of course. They think if you're the advisor, they're going to trust you. You're more honest, right? We just are going to be a resource to them. That's another word. I could put that in there next time. Resource, helper, advisor, resource, value. We're valuable to them. So let's see here. Winnie has a question. Let's see. Let me take it back to presentations. I'm just going to read this to the class because I'm sure it's important here. Since interviews are also part of the selling of skills, absolutely. What happens to those interviews that you are required to prepare a case study for? Okay, so we have to prepare something ahead of time. So there's no questions will be asked, but you need to cover it like you're creating the idea, new product, service being handled. Are there tips that can handle that? So again, think about this. You're in an interview and they ask you to prepare a case. It could even be your boss ask you to prepare a presentation. like a case presentation that you have to present. They may not ask questions during that process, right? You're preparing, you have to write something down and prepare something. So what you would have to kind of think about, Winnie or whoever is doing this, kind of start to think about what what questions might they have about your product or project? What questions? What objections might they have? You know, Again, try to put yourself into their shoes, the group that you're presenting to, the person interviewing you. What might they have a question about? What might be their reservations for hiring you? Maybe they're trying to uncover your weaknesses. Okay. Everybody has strengths and areas that they can improve, everybody, right? And so maybe they'll ask you a question. You got to think about this, about a difficult time you had and how you dealt with it, that directly pertains to, oh, why is it that you had 3 jobs in the last 3 years? Going into the presentation, the interview, the conversation, having an answer to that. And again, you'll answer it in the way you're presenting. So it's like you could take this into a group setting. If you know the 5 common objections that people are going to make, you could already have it in your presentation in how you present yourself, those 5 objections. If you went to my website, my personal website, I already know the #1 objection people come to me with because I've been coaching people for so many years, athletes or business people that want to perform. They tell me this. We talk about it, the jitters in the presentation. How come I can't perform as well and practice as I do in real competition? How come I can't perform as well in, when I do it in my bathroom mirror as when I do it live in front of people? How come? That's the #1 thing I get from people. So on my website, and I'll tell you this is really, really good insight. Okay, that's not in the book. More that you can't get it from the book. Okay, if you know the hot objections or the hot buttons or the problems that people are going to come to you and give you, and you address those ahead of time, that creates a bond, a connection. So I just literally had this happen just in the last few weeks. Somebody was coming to me. It was a parent looking for some help for their daughter. They were competing at a high level in athletics, and they were getting nervous in competition, and it wasn't working as well for them when they were competing at a high level. They went to my website. They went to my website and saw this. Oh, wow. They saw their daughter there in the, are you able to perform at the same high level in competition that you do in practice? If not, here's some issues. Here's what I can help you with. That's the first thing they saw on my website. Boom. They were like, and then I gave them some resources. Here's how to handle, you got some confidence issues. Here's how to calm yourself down. So what did I do? Okay, I wasn't even there, but I created this ahead of time, knowing that the people that come to me have certain things that they want from me. Again, you have to know yourself well enough you have to know your competition. You have to know your customers. You have to know who you're dealing with. Homework in advance. Okay. And I handled that ahead of time. Winnie, I hope this is helpful for you. Um, and I addressed that in the presentation in my website. So already they are feeling that bond, that trust, that connection of, hey, he could be an advisor. He is a resource. So when they contacted me, what it was, they sent me an email and they said, I loved your website. I'm like, really? And I asked them why. I want to know, what was it about it? It spoke to me, they said. Then I talked to him on the phone, and it was a father, and I was like, he's clearly just, I was able to reach him in that way. That was a lot of hours of me doing my homework ahead of time, right? And a lot of self-assessment and a lot of awareness and a lot of preparing and a lot of knowing what people's objections might be and a lot of knowing my customer and a lot of being adaptive at communicating. That's real life stuff. So the stuff that we're talking about here, I use every day. Okay? Dealing with objections, they're real. And Winnie, give me a thumbs up. Tell me something. Is that good? Does that help you? Hopefully Winnie's still on. Not sure. But anyway, you can watch the recording if you had to jump off. But anyway, good. Thank you. Um, so if anybody else, I'll open it up. Does anybody have, think about this. We're all very experienced people here. I'm the professor teaching the course, but you guys have a lot of knowledge here too. So somebody, I want, anybody, if something comes to mind right now, you're welcome, Winnie. If something comes to mind, share. Winnie's talking about, we're all dealing with these kinds of issues sometimes, right? We have to prepare a case. We have to prepare ahead of time. And maybe we can't ask all the questions that we're dealing with. Is there a particular way when you're doing a presentation? Think about this. When you're working on a presentation, how do you prepare? How do you ahead of time connect with a potential prospect, a customer, a colleague ahead of time? You haven't seen them yet. How do you get that ahead of time? So you could type something in the chat. I just leave that with you. We'll take a break in about 10 minutes. So start to think about how can I use this in my day-to-day life? How can I use this in my business as an employee? How can I use this when I'm connecting with other people? How can I use this in my consulting or my engineering or my whatever it is I'm doing? Think about that. That's what I want for you. As a professor, I want you to have the skills to do that. So start to think about how you could use this in your life, dealing with objections. Okay. So I want to get into a couple of these and then we'll take a break here. Start to think when buyers might raise objections. Again, if we're not even in a sales process, when might the interviewer raise an objection about you, or the colleague, or your boss, or whoever it is you're dealing with, your relative, your kids? When? Start to think about this from that perspective. Okay, so obviously, when you're setting up the appointment, when you're okay, you're reaching out to a friend of yours, and you're setting up a day of the week to meet. They might raise objection. I'm busy. I got a lot going on, even though they're a friend, got a lot happening. So there could be objections at the very beginning, setting up the appointment. Sure, of course. I don't have time to see. I'm too busy. And if we don't know how to deal with that ahead of time, then we've kind of already lost. Then we're just kind of fumbling our words and phrases about, we there were some ways that we talked about last time about dealing with difficult situations, on some of those grids from last time. But we're going to go over this, start to kind of think about. They're going to give you objections when you're presenting. They might put their hand up. Oh, I don't like that. That I've heard the opposite, that you should do that. I literally was with the exercise. I was at the gym this last week. I was doing an activity, flies. If those of you have been in exercise, and there's a weight machine doing this, and I was told by the trainer to have my hands up higher. One of the other people working out came over to me, and he's like, "You're doing it wrong." This is literally what he said. "You're doing it wrong. You should have your eyes." I watched a YouTube video. This is literally what he said to me. "And you should have your hands lower." While I was working out, while you're doing the presentation, people are going to have objections to what you're doing. How did I handle that? Well, I told him, you know, "Do you know Kevin, the trainer here?" "Oh, yeah, I know. He told me to do it this way, and he told me the reason why." Everybody has an opinion, right? Think about this. Everybody has an opinion. They may have an objection that has nothing to do with your product or service, but it might be because somebody spilled something in their head that they have to ask if they don't like this particular thing. So during the presentation, but again, you want to handle it tactfully, right? You don't want to dismiss it. You don't want to laugh. "Oh, that's a stupid question. Why would you ask that? Why would you have what?" Nobody has an objections like that. Of course, we don't want to do that, right? But think about this. We can get objections after the sale. You've already closed the business. They've already told you they're going to do the chores at home. And while they're doing it, they stop and they're like, "Oh, now I see. This is hard. This is too much work here to change my product. I'm not going to do it anymore." You can get objections all of those places, okay? Common objections, right? Think about this again as we go through dealing with difficult people. It could be related to needs, right? I don't need your product or service or consulting. I don't need it. I'm happy with what I have now. You know, you have a new product, and I've never done it that way before. That's outside of my expertise. Related to the product. I don't like your service. I don't like your product. I don't understand it. It's too complicated. Your software package, way too complicated. Your return policy, oh my gosh, it's 9 pages long about your product. I don't understand. How do I need more information. You'll get this all the time. I need more information. I don't have all the information. Find out what's important to them. Find out what their objections are. What's most important? Remember this need behind the need behind the need. We talked about that. Remember? There could be an objection behind the objection. And that's all your ability to do that is you're uncovering need. You're trying to position the value of your product. So if they say need more information, what specifically do you need? I'm happy to share that with you. They might just be throwing that out. I need more on your service, your models, they might just trying to keep you busy because they think you don't want to hear objections. So they might just use this as a go-to. I need more information. I need to talk to my other superiors, right? They'll give you that. I need to talk to somebody else. I don't make the decision. I just work here, right? Okay, other things related to the source. I don't like your company. I used to do business with your company 10 years ago. You had that nasty gentleman there that behind customer service. What was his name? Yeah, you know him. Oh, I don't like him. Well, he's long gone by now, right? But it doesn't matter because that's the perception. The expectation is they don't like your company. They don't like you. They don't like you. You drove up in a car they just despise. They don't like your shirt. They don't like your who knows what. They don't like your accent. They don't like you. They don't like your, I don't know, whatever, you name it. And another common objection to sort, we're already working with this company. They're fantastic. That it could be very true, of course. They could be very satisfied. A master salesperson, a master communicator can still get an opening. Doesn't mean you'll get the sale, but you could still get the opening if you're really good at your job, even if they're happy with their current product, company, or service. Because you'll find in your questioning, open and closed ends, different kinds of ways, that you find about opportunities that they didn't think about. Maybe there's a something about their service that they're not getting that they shared with you, and then you're like, wow, there's the opportunity. Psh, I can open that up. It could be an easy thing like price. They might not have the money. Literally, they might not have the money. Your product might be too high of a premium for them. Then maybe you didn't do a good job in, remember, the leads funnel, the leads to prospect to customer. Maybe you, the salesperson, did not do a good job of asking questions ahead of time to find that out, knowing that your product was way beyond the capacity of this company to handle. Okay. Years ago, one of my sales jobs, and I don't really talk about this that much because it only lasted like 6 weeks. One of the first jobs I had out of college um, was selling. We talked about tax planning consulting, right? Um, I looked at it as like a summer job, thinking that maybe it could be long term, and it was awful. The guy that I was selling to assumed I had all the sales training, and I didn't have a lot. Okay. So I'm selling tax planning services and consulting services to small business. So I would park my car literally at one end of a street that had all these small businesses, stores and businesses and whatever, retail places. And I'd go in there and talk to them, find who the owner was. I did a little bit of prospecting. Cold calling was a lot of it. And I remember going into a nail salon, and they would love to have somebody help them with their taxes. And they were asking me, well, how much is your service? And I had like a basic idea of like the service. And the guy wanted a 3-year plan for working with businesses. And I said, well, our least valued, our least expensive service was this $3,000, whatever it was. I can't remember exact figures. And they're like, $3,000? I don't even make $3,000 in 3 months' time. Why would I spend? So, the reason I'm telling you this is sometimes you'll get questions about price that if I would have known ahead of time, I wouldn't even walked into that store. Wouldn't waste my time, wouldn't waste their time. So preparation is so important. They just can't afford your product or service. That could very well be true. Now, you might have a plan. Well, they could spread the payments out. They could do various things. They don't have to pay for it all at once. You get 90 days dating, meaning you could pay in 90 days. That could be great, right? Um, there's ways to deal with objections. Sometimes you can't overcome them. And if that's the case, then and I think we talked about this last time. Um, I know one of you asked this question. Sometimes there's something you just can't overcome. So you have to highlight all the other value pieces that your product or service brings. And hopefully that more than makes up for the one area you can't overcome. And say that is price. Okay, other common objections related to time. I'm just not interested. That's a hard one, right? Because then you got to sift through all the minutia and find out, okay, how do I get their interest? Or I need more time to think about it. Oh, that's a good one. You get that a lot, I'm sure, in your business. Your boss, your asks for a raise. I need time to think about it. I need time to talk to my boss about that. Need time. How much time? No idea. I need 6 years because I don't want to talk to you, right? Think about some of the preparation in those we talk about in that chapter on the sales call, being in there. your objectives, okay? Objectives, not objections, objectives. What were your objectives going into that call? Did you close them on certain things? And did you meet those objectives? Because if you did, then you probably won't get this. I need more time to think about it. I'm not interested today. So um, let's see here. I know there's another comment here in the chat. Wow, that's good. Um, so here, Lizette, you might want to take a look at the chat here. I can read it out here. So as I explained, usually people, if the target audience chooses correctly, have two types of objections. Okay. The first is too expensive. This is probably from real life, right? Too expensive, and usually means the customer doesn't get enough value. Perfect. That's exactly it. If they think you're too expensive, they don't see the value, right? So you have to really ask questions around build your value, right? Um, and sometimes the second one is, they need to think about it. They just don't fully understand whether your product can help them. I get it. That's great. Thank you for that, sharing that, um, Liza. I think that summarizes it very clearly. Think about this. You know, um, they may need more information, or you're not doing your job as showing them the value. I think that's really what it comes down to a lot of times, right? Usually, if you're not persuading, even we'll take it outside of the selling process, you're talking to a colleague and you want them to help you on a work project, or your boss, you need more help here and you're managing this project, and they don't see the the need for you to have more help, you're not doing a good enough job of building the value of why you need help, or they don't have enough information, so you're not presenting it clear enough. So think about those things. Other objections too. Um, Sometimes we have, again, if you can have answers to a lot of the common objections ahead of time, it may not be perfect to who you're dealing with, to what is common to them, you might be able to at least uncover some things and get them talking ahead of time, meaning that they might send you a message, or they might, in the beginning of the conversation with you, oh, this is my issue here. So there's a couple of things, right? They might, have no room for your product line. That's possible. You're selling apparel and their store is really busy, with customers, but they have no room on their shelves. So they literally have no room to put your product in. Now you could think about this. Well, maybe you could store the product for them and place like samples there. There's always ways to deal with objections. Okay, there's always ways. But sometimes, again, you can't fully uncover it until you ask enough questions. They might say this. Some of these are so. This was in the book, so think about this. And I guess in nowadays, in today's society, this stuff happens, right? People want kickbacks. Make it worth my time. I want you. If you want me to do business with you, you're going to have to buy my business. It happens, right? We do this, and remember we talked about that very beginning, ethics and legal ramifications. This happens. Kickbacks. They want something, and so they want you to take them out to lunch. That could be harmless, or they want you to buy them something. That happens. Now, there's ways to do things like that. If you're having a conversation with him, you pull him out of the office, but sometimes there's ethics about it. You might not be able to bring them to a very fancy restaurant because it's more than $50. You have to keep it down price. Um, they might just be, and I've gotten this too. It's a lot of hassle to switch customers. It's a lot of hassle to switch suppliers. I got to change all my paperwork, my computer systems. I got to get all that data out of there and add yours. It's a lot of work. And it could be. And if you're a good salesperson, you'll uncover that and know that that's an objection. And then you can figure out, okay, you know what? We have people to help you with that. In the publishing business, when I was selling textbooks, if a professor is, changing books, they have to prepare their notes differently sometimes, right? They have to prepare their exams differently. And so that takes time. So one of the way we worked with that is we have people in house. We tell the professor, we have people in house that could take your syllabus and your course and match it to the new book content. And we have new ways to give you content that matches how you teach. So you don't have to change your notes. Whoa. You have somebody that could do that? Absolutely. Here's what you did. They had an objective. They had an objection that was real, and you uncovered it, and you solved that objection. You built value by doing that. That value allowed them to see you more as, hey, they're not just a salesperson, they're an advisor. They're a problem solver. They're a solution finder. They're a resource. See how it works? So, what is the mindset that we want to create ahead of time? Remember, I asked in the beginning a couple of sessions ago, it's like, what do you, when you're working with somebody, dealing with somebody in a sales situation or work or at home, think about what do we want to be known as, meaning that what do we want to have happen in this situation, in that setting? And can we deliver that? Right? So, Liza talked about, she said, we have scripts for preparing. Think about this. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Scripts. If you have to talk to your boss about a work issue, you could imagine that conversation ahead of time. Come up with, and if you know your boss well enough, what are they going to object to? Have ahead of time, write it down. They're going to tell me this. They're going to tell me that. They're going to say they don't have this in the budget. If you know that ahead of time, then work through those. So literally prepare a script. This is what they're going to say. This is how they're going to object. You're in a sales call ahead of time. You might know, based on your product, hopefully you do, or your service, what are the keys that people like about your product or service? What are the key objections that they come up with? Work through those scenarios ahead of time, and you've just built a ton of value for yourself because you've saved your time. Now you'll be better and more effective. All right, so I'm looking at the clock here. Let's take 10 minutes. For me, it's quarter past the hour. Wherever you're at, maybe you're in a different time zone, but come back in 10 minutes and we'll keep going with common objectives and then more with the objections. How do we deal with those? Because that's the fun stuff, right? That's what I want to help you with. And we'll have a dialogue because I want to hear from you about objections that you've heard that you can't solve or ways that you've solved them, not just in sales, but in conversations with colleagues or people at your company or other situations where you've been the buyer. Okay. All right, take 10 everyone, and I'll see you back in shortly. All right, welcome back everyone. Those that are back. Elena, I wanted to address you had a couple of comments that the first I didn't talk about, and Elena had mentioned too, when dealing with objections, a couple things. She said active listening is crucial. I think that's so important, right? We talk about why is the person raising an objection to your service or product or whatever. If we listen carefully, we'll kind of uncover things, and then we can address and ask better questions to get at that. Um, but Elena, really, I like this because some companies have, you know, a top 10 sheet in a way. Now, Elena has, dealing with software. And so her company has an algorithm, which is kind of a rubric, a way to assess things, right? To look at data and assess, okay, how do we work with this data? And she said the algorithm basically, and I love these categories. Think about this class as we're looking at objections to deal with. Agree with the objection. Okay, agree with it, meaning that if the person that you're talking to is raising objections, agree in a sense that what they're bringing up is important to them to know. Maybe you don't agree with it from the standpoint, like they say, your service is way too expensive. Oh, yes, you're right. We're way too expensive. No, not like that, but it's like why they're raising it is important for them to know and to be glad. Remember, be glad that they shared something with you because that means because sometimes they're like, I'm not going to talk about that and dance around things. Oh, everything's perfect. Love your service. I'm going to buy. I'll buy it for 5 years, and you never hear from them again. Um, but after you agree, you provide a logical argument to support your position. Okay, so yes, our product is higher priced. It's a higher value product, but here's why. Let me explain that to you. This is why we did, I think there was an example in the book where it talked about your product. Sometimes, cheaper people buy cheaper products because it's not going to last as long. We wanted to make sure our product lasts 10 years or longer. Sure, we could have used cheaper materials, right? And it would have been 20% cheaper for our product. We didn't want to do that. We don't want you to have those issues that you deal with. Problems come up like that. We sell vacuum cleaners. We don't want the wheel breaking after 3 uses or the belt breaking. We want to design it so it lasts for 10 years. That's why it's twice the value of most other vacuums at 30% higher cost. You get twice the value for 30% more, right? So it's positioning, how you support things. So Elena, thank you. That's this is what I wanted you all to share because I think you all have valuable insight here. So everybody here in this class, make a note, look through the chat because there's some really great comments here. Okay, people's personal experiences in their profession as they're dealing with clients, as they're working through issues, whether it's an interview or a selling situation or working with a client. It's all valuable. That's why we're working through these. Okay. So think about this. I like this little scale analogy here, relationship between costs and benefits. Again, just to kind of have a mindset of what the buyer's looking at when they talk to you or your boss when you're talking to them. There's costs to everything. Again, hassle to switch, financial costs, time, resources. I got to tell my other supplier we're not using them anymore. That's like, oh, if they're, it's lots of costs. Okay. And what are the benefits to using your product, your service, your consulting, your coaching? And you obviously want the scale in your favor. And this is how a buyer thinks, right? You present, they give you objections, they tell you what they want, they raise objections. You try to deal with those. And then it's still not balanced enough. The costs are way too high, right? What you want to be able to do is move. This is benefits, this is costs. You want to like at least balance, if not balance, so the benefits outweigh the costs. And that's how you want to think about every conversation we have that's consequential, that's important. Not just sales, but with our colleagues, our boss, our family, our friends, whomever. Do you offer more value than they expect. The weight of the scale is you're offering them way more value. If you offer way more value more of the time, you can't always do it, but more of the time, what's going to happen is then they see you as an advisor. They see you as a resource. They see you as somebody that can help to work through things. Um, let's see. Esgy says, "Oh, this is another good objection that's raised. I'm not the decision maker." And that's good. They actually tell you that. Sometimes they tell you that, and they actually are the decision maker. They just don't want to deal with it. Um, so the seller's talking, and they say, "I don't have the authority to make the decision." Okay, or they may act as though they don't have the authority. That's a great. So, all right, class. Let's go to work here. So here's the objection. I'm not the decision maker. You're dealing with somebody that's not the decision maker. They tell you that. And you got to figure it out. You want to make the sale. You want to make the connection. You want to get the job. You're talking to somebody in an interview and they say, I'm not the decision maker. I've had that happen, right? I think we all had that happen, right? Maybe they are, but you have to uncover that. So, how do we deal with that? Let's look at Ezgi's question here. How do we deal with that? You can type it in the chat. You can unmute yourself. I want to hear from you. I mean, we're very resourceful people. We're very creative. If somebody tells you they're not the decision maker, like here's the thing: you're talking to your boss. Put it in a different way. You're talking to your boss, and you're asking for help on a work project. And they say, you know what? I don't have the authority to make that decision. How do you handle that objection? You just walk away with your tail between your legs and just, okay, I'll just, okay, there you go. Asking who the decision maker is then, right? So you got to find that out. Absolutely, right? By asking questions to clarify who is responsible. Right, absolutely. Okay, so again, you're not attacking the other person. Just because they may not be the decision maker, that's okay. You got to get to that decision maker, though, right? You got to find who that is. You got to connect with them. But here's the thing, too. Again, there's this word objective, an objection. Objective. If you're objective, when you're making your sales call, when you're talking to the boss, when you're talking to somebody, if your objective is to make the other person want to either do business with you or be an advocate for you. Like you could be talking to your boss, they don't have the authority to bring work help for you. They have to go to their boss or their upper boss, but you want to put your product or service in a good light. And the only way to do that is to position yourself. So ask questions. And let's see, Esgy puts down here, I guess even if the buyer is not the decision maker, it's important to stay in touch with them and keep them informed. Absolutely. I think that's really critical. This will help to stay top of mind, increases your chances of making future sale. Exactly. They could be an influencer. Just because, and sometimes they're a gatekeeper too. They don't want to get you in front of the person you need to see. That happens, right? But this is, I always look at this. So you kind of think about that. Again, I think I shared with you, my mom was a master in sales, masterful, really great, selling a service, a collection service to doctors and hospitals and businesses. She treated everyone like they were the most important person. There's another book here that's a great book. It's like 100 years old. How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's still Dale Carnegie. Okay, you may have heard that name, may have heard the book, may have not. It's been around, I don't know, 100 years, at least like 80 years. How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think that was in that book. Treat everyone like they were the most important person you're dealing with. Because it's just like Esky has said here. Maybe they are not the decision maker, but it's important to keep that person, treat them well, keep them informed. Maybe then you could turn them into an advocate, to somebody that could support you, that likes you or likes your product, that could then fight for you to get the business. You're interviewing for a job. Maybe they're not the person that does the ultimate hiring. Okay. I've had this. You interview for something, I'm partnering with a business owner, and I'm dealing with one of the business owners. And there's the second one, their husband and wife or whomever it is, right? I talked to one, they're not the ultimate decision maker. They're their spouses. I got to get them to like what I do, to feel that I have value to offer. And if I do the good job there, then they'll fight for me. Then they'll make sure I have time with the other one, the other decision maker. So that's what you want to do. It's always like, again, if you treat everyone like, not only they want to be treated like with respect and kindness and curiosity, like they're important, because they are, whoever it is. And they could be, again, think about it, they could be really mean and irritable. If you treated them kindly, and maybe you were the only one that day treated them kindly, because in the back of your mind you might be thinking, well, they've had a tough night. Maybe they were up all night with their dog or their child or sick relative or whomever. You don't know. So everybody's going through something, right? So if you, in the back of your mind, they're dealing with difficult situation, circumstances, you don't know, treat them kindly. Um, and I think your chances increase. That's what Esgy writes here. It's like your chances will increase of making a future sale. Absolutely. You might not be able to close right then and there. Again, sometimes the buying cycle is 3 years. Sometimes it's 3 days, 3 hours, in between there, right? So let's kind of think through this. This is another way to want to give you some sense. Okay, they give you objections. How do we deal with them? Now, Elena has in her company has a process, a system for dealing with it. Okay, so let's talk about some systems, some general ways that we can like key in on somebody raises this objection. How do you handle it? Okay, this is a general system. The I guess is actually an acrostic, LARC, right? LARC, LAARC. Just kind of a remembering device here, a mnemonic. And if you remember what Elena said, yeah, listen. They're giving you an objection. Listen, acknowledge it. You see where Elena's company is using, and maybe they're using this. Think about this. Assess the validity. Oh, here's something we haven't talked about really. Um, yeah, you agree with it. Yeah, that's important to you. But they might just say, maybe there's other things that are not as important. They might think your product is way overpriced. Okay. And that's their objection. But after you assess what they mean, seller or buyer, what do you mean by way overpriced? They might give you a number. And you're like, really? We're below that price. So that's the validity. Sometimes they have a perception in their mind that's not accurate. You want to snuff that out. And then you respond, right? Then you respond, you confirm. Okay, if you respond and clear up that objection, you got to know. So you got to ask them, does that handle your concern about that? Do you, if that was handled, can you move forward with the purchase? And say, well, no, I got all these other ones to things to think about. So this LARC method, basic scaffolding for how to deal with an objection. Listen, acknowledge, yeah, you're assessing the validity, responding, right? And then you're confirming, did I handle that? Maybe you didn't, and got to keep questioning. Got to keep getting to the um, ejection behind the objection. Think about these kinds of things too. Okay. Responding objections, behaviors of successful salespeople. I'd like to know what people do that are successful, right? Um, we talked about this. Anticipate objections and prepare for responses. I mean, that's huge. So many of the comments we talk about that, right? Do you know, when gave the example of what was on my website, do you know the potential objections your boss might give you for asking for a raise? Do you know the potential objections that the buyer might give you for wanting to roll out your service to all their departments? I'm sure you probably have some idea. And then prepare how you respond to that. It's pretty basic, right? I mean, simple isn't always easy. This is simple, but it's not always easy. Okay. Um, in this way, you forestall concerns, meaning that you kind of preemptively prevent something before it happens. That's kind of cool, right? Think about that. You're like this masterful salesperson. You anticipate objections. You solve them before they even become an issue, ahead of time. And it allows you to relax a little bit more. Doesn't mean you're going to get the sale right there, but now you've just added value to the conversation, added value to the potential customer, the prospect, because now they see you've solved the problem that they had ahead of time. That's cool. Excuses. It's just an excuse. Think about this. People have excuses all the time. An objection is an excuse for why to not buy from you. And so and that's, I like that word mask. It's a mask. They're true objections, right? Sometimes it is. They'll give you excuses. Your service, it takes us too long to learn a new software. Way too long. Don't have the time. Don't have the resources. There might be an objection in there. That's just excuses. You know it's a better product than what they're using. They've already told you how the issues that they have, and they're just giving you this thing about they don't want to switch. Maybe that's the real objection, is they have to do some more work behind the scenes. Snuff that out. Telling the truth, of course. We talked about that already. Probing is just asking questions. It's just asking questions. Clarify their concerns. So how do we ask questions? Again, we'll get into that. We had the open-ended and closed-ended questions. Now we're going to kind of talk about beyond the actual verbal sometimes. Think about this. Friendly, this is interesting. I love this. This is a nonverbal. It's almost like masterful selling and emotional intelligence. Okay. There's also this friendly, silent, questioning stare. You smile. You ask a question and you smile. You don't say anything until the buyer says something. Have you ever seen that done before? To yourself, to others? Have you done it? Think about this. Now, you're encouraging the buyer to ask. It's like this, and I learned this in sales in the very beginning. When you've satisfied some of their objections and you think you can trial close, meaning, or you ask them, okay, give them, do you want this product in a dozen units or this in 2 dozen units? And you say nothing. after that. They might say, whoa, I'm not ready to buy yet. Okay, what is it that you still need to know? Or they might automatically, and it's just like well, I'll say this word, it's almost like a mind game in a way. If you really know you're offering a value, from an authentic standpoint, and the buyer's there and their job is to resist buying they want the best value, the best price, whatever. Okay. So there's this tension already sometimes in there before you even go in there. But if you know you offer good value, you handled all their objections, and you can encourage them by a stare, a smile, like a silence after you ask the question. Let them elaborate. And then what happens is usually they'll break the silence. It's a negotiation tool. Sometimes it's a 30 seconds long. It's very uncomfortable. Will you buy my product? They're thinking about it. And then the salesperson continues to talk. Well, it's this, that, and that. Oh, ask that question, then be quiet. Quiet confidence, and then see what they say. You're interviewing for a job, it's the third interview. They like you, they've told you that, and you already talked about specifics of when you can start and when that role is and stuff, and to say, you could make the sale in that, I'm ready to start. Let's go. Let's ready to start on Monday, like you said. Will you hire me? And then you say nothing. You obviously have to have built up the not credibility, but you've built in the process to get to that stage where you can ask that question. You built your value. Then you ask. And then you see what happens. They might still say, no, you know what? We have a few more candidates we have to interview, and then we'll talk to you about the offer potential. Right? So the more of the questioning, probing method. It's good to know, sometimes mistakes and blunders salespeople make. Assuming we know the answer to the question. Sometimes we don't understand the question. Um, Again, it gets back to how well do we know our product or service, and how good are we at uncovering potential needs. But sometimes we just don't understand the question. So a lot of times we assume. Again, they could be thinking, they could say something like, your product is, the servicing cost of your product is too much. And you might think they're talking about, we're way too expensive. And they're thinking about the reliability, but you're thinking price. You don't understand. So you're talking all about the value in terms of price. Well, we're not as expensive as what you might think. And they really want to know about reliability of service. So then you answer the wrong question. That can happen. And this is one that happens a lot too. Okay. You fail to fully understand the objection. If you're really good at asking questions and you're good at checking, then you'll find out maybe you only answered half of the objection. You didn't fully answer it. That's why I check. It's like, did that, buyer, whoever, did that answer your questions? Did that fully understand? Do you fully understand that now? Does that make sense? All things being equal now, that's no longer an issue, right? Well, they might say, no, actually, you don't understand it. There's this piece too. Okay. And then that helps you uncover. But, if we're new in sales, if we're new in negotiating, if we're new in communicating, we make these blunders sometimes. It's okay. We just have to uncover and get better at questioning. Common methods for responding to objections, and this is good because um, there's lots of different ways to be effective, and we can talk about this. And so uh, this is the first one they call direct denial, right? No, that's not right. Again, it depends on who you're talking to. You know what? I heard your product. It takes 3 months to ship to my place of business. We can't wait 3 months. We need it within a month. That's not right. You could just say, you know what? Some other companies take 3 months to build the product. We can get it to you in 30 days, and this is how we do it. Direct denial. Indirect denial is when we'll talk about that, kind of skirting the surface of that. And then sometimes we talk about, if the buyer raises a valid concern, we can use that. We use it. Oh, you know what? We bring in a referral. We bring in an acknowledgement. We bring in, if they're bringing in a valid concern, a valid objection, we use it. You know what? Because that's important to you. Servicing your software when you got bugs and problems when you're using it, that's a big deal. Yes, not everything is perfect. You can tell them we have one of our major customers had some issues with something we implemented, but we were able within the first hour that we heard about their issue to have people start addressing their needs, and that uncovered a lot of things, and now it's working even better. Boom, you've turned an objection into a selling point that builds more value. So how do we do all this stuff, right? So the direct denial, that may be the approach that you could take. No, that's not right. Your product is $10,000. They think, no, actually it's 5,000. It's 10,000 if you buy two of them. Oh wow, I didn't understand that. Okay. Now they might, sales purpose. You have to have the facts to back up, right? You're not just going to deny and say, no, that's not right. If you know that's inaccurate information, again, you have to be tactful. Direct denial, you got to be careful because you're saying no. Again, if somebody's bringing it up, obviously you don't want to dance around. If they're saying your product is unreliable and it's not, it's really good, maybe they have one instance where it wasn't reliable, but you have to uncover that and address that. And you could say, you know what, that's 1 out of 100, but we take that one very seriously, and here's how we did it, right? And I used this example before with you when I was selling the floor finish for hardwood floors, and that one customer got a milky, cloudy floor using the product. Well, we took care of her. And we made it so that we paid for the products. We got somebody out there to do the work for us, and better value for them in the long run. That they were a raging fan of our business afterwards. So sometimes you can direct denial, sometimes it's indirect, right? You deny the objection, but you it's like softening the response. It's like kind of going around the side, right? To use a sports analogy, it's like kind of not going right up the middle, it's going around the end, to use a soccer football analogy. Avoid direct confrontation. Yeah, that's what it does. I mean, you're not telling the person you're wrong, but you're recognizing where they're at, and it's important to them. So you're kind of figuring out, okay, their statement has maybe the beginnings of truth, but it's not fully accurate. This is how I need to address it. Okay, so just kind of start to think about how you're going to respond. You can directly go right at it. You can go an end around, right? There's other ways, effective ways to revisit. Salesperson turns the objection into a reason for buying. This is what I'm talking about. They say your product or service is It takes too long to deliver your product or service. And you say, you know what? In that time that it takes, we're studying your business and we're working hand in hand with your product team. That's why it takes so long, because we match exactly what you need. We customize our product to meet your needs. That does take a longer time, but then you get exactly what you need in the way you need it. Wow. So it's like we call it the boomerang method because it bounces back. The objection then becomes the reason they buy. That happens a lot if we're good and we're skilled, and that objection is a true objection and one of the main ones. Then it becomes a reason to buy. Because why? Because it helps them see the value, right? It helps them see the value. And just to kind of think about again as we talk about, okay, the drivers, the amiables, the analyticals, the effectives, works with most personality styles types, this revisit method, because you're talking about something they brought up that you're pulling out and you're using that as the focal point or one of the focal points to buy. And here's another one, acknowledgement method. So salesperson, you let the buyer talk, you acknowledge it. This is what Elena said. We acknowledge it. Yeah, that is an issue. Okay. But you can do it. You don't have to like get into it. You can kind of like put, okay, yeah, yes, that's an issue. Let's talk about this, and then we'll get back to that. So I know somebody, maybe it was Muhammad or I can't remember, last week, they were talking and said, what if I'm talking to somebody and I can't solve this need, but my service or something does all these other four things. How do you deal with that? And I was like, well, you really key in on the other four things that build value. And if you have one thing that you can't address is overpowered by the four things, then maybe you have a good chance of them adopting your product or service. And this is kind of the acknowledgement. You're kind of like doing that in a sense because you're like, you can't fully solve their issue for this objection. But they have five other objections that you got really good stuff that you can solve. And maybe 5 out of 6 gets you the sale. So you're acknowledging, you're like, yeah, that I hear you. I know that's important to you, but you also said those other 5 things are important. Let's talk about those. And obviously it says you shouldn't use it if the objection is false. Of course not. You got to uncover that, right? Then you don't always do it. But it could be in that situation where there's one objection you can't handle, or the buyer raises something that you're like, that's going to take me way too long to get in. That's weeds. We don't need to go there. You're like, yes, that's important. Can we address that later? Let's talk about these other issues right now. And you're doing it in a kind way. You're not doing it to be manipulative, right? You're doing it in a kind way because you're like, that, it's going to take me a half hour to go through that. That's going to eat up all our time. Let's talk about all these other things, and we can always come back to that if it's still an issue later on. And I think, again, if you get good at communication, you can do that. One of your kids gives you objections of why they don't want to do a chore, or a relative is like, you ask them for a ride to the store because your car is in the shop being serviced, and they're like, well, I don't have time to do that. Could you take me to the store and I'll figure out, maybe I'll call Uber to get me home. Could you at least do that? Yeah, I can do that. I mean, then I don't have to wait for you. So you're kind of dancing around it a little bit, right? But you get them to do what you want to do, right? So again, other effective responses. You can postpone, right? Prospect raises a question, an objection, and you would prefer to answer later. Sometimes you don't have all the facts. You don't have all the facts. Maybe they asked you a technical objection that you literally have some idea, but you're not as knowledgeable about that part of your business, your product, your service. And you're like, prospect, but buyer, potential customer. Can I get back to you tomorrow with that answer? Let's address these things that I know that we can cover, and let me get back to that tomorrow with you. Again, you're honest, you're doing a good job, and you're just trying to add value, but you don't want to speak falsehoods that you don't know. So you can do that. Delay the answer. Um, we have this happen all the time to us. Like somebody is waiting. We're waiting for somebody to make a decision. They're hiring. We don't know. They're talking to 10, 12 people. We don't know those people. We want to know if they're going to want us, or they're going to hire us. And they keep putting us off, 2 more weeks, 1 more week, whatever, you know. It happens to us too. Think about that. And if it's done in a kind way, we're still going through that process. We revalue your time. Thank you very much. We have a few more things we need to work through with a couple of our other candidates. You know, um, some questions were raised. We need to get those answered, and then we'll get back to you in 2 weeks. Positioning. We feel better about that rather than to say, we're going to take 2 weeks. 2 weeks go by, you hear nothing. So there's a way to position your questions, your response. The postponing method is a good way to use that. So here's the thing. Let's talk about each of these methods in real ways that you can use. Some of these are kind of, if you start to think about, this is like working through. This was in the book here, so you can go back to the book Exhibit 10.5. There was these 3 charts. Direct denial, here's what you do. That's simply not true. That's not true. This is what our product does. Here's how it lasts 3 years. Indirect denial. Yeah, I could see why you would raise that concern. That's an issue with many of the products in our industry. But in our last 3 years, that's never been an issue. Compensation, I agree that the quality may not be as high. This is what I was talking about. I said it was in the book here. But sometimes, our products are designed for customers looking at lower price alternatives. Sometimes they're designed for that. Otherwise, and so that's what they're, buying lower quality. Ours is better quality. And that's why it's a little more money. That's why it's going to cost twice as much. But our windows, if we're selling windows into I don't know, to your home, which we purchased a bunch of windows about 8-10 years ago in my home, there were lots of cheaper windows. But we went with one that aesthetically looked really nice for our older home and was a best value, kept all it was sound and air, and it was great. Yeah, it was more money. But it was interesting because we had people come and to talk to us, different sellers, different windows, and how each of them presented. And, oh, yours is the most expensive. They use these methods on us, is what I'm saying. And some were very good. The referral method, I can certainly understand how you feel. This particular customer felt like that before. We had the same objection, they raised it. But this is how we handled it. Boom. Take that objection, make it into a selling point, and there you go. Or you revisit it, fact that the quality is lower, sure, but there's a very good reason why that's the case. Let me share that with you. But let's talk about these other things right now, and we'll get back to that, because these are really important things too, and you stressed how important these other issues are. Let's delve into those, then we'll get back to this other one. And what you're basically doing is building value on the things that are really critical. And again, if there's something that your product or service software can't handle fully, you're kind of positioning you in the best way possible. It's like we're interviewing. We have strengths, we have things that we're not as good at. So we have to look at, okay, how do we position the strengths? Right? There might be 9 really key things that you're really good at. Okay. And only 4 pertain to this particular job. So you don't want to highlight all 9. But if there's also a weakness you have, you want to turn that, they always say, try to turn that weakness into a strength, right? This is just a one that people say a lot. I've heard this one used. It's like, if you're um, busy a lot of time, it's like you're working a lot of hours. Sometimes you could say, you know, uh, sometimes I have so many tasks that I'm working on to show how complex of skill that you have. Sometimes I have so many things that I'm working on. Sometimes I get a little overwhelmed at the beginning until I organize everything. So I do have that as an issue because I have a tendency, because I can handle so much, I have a tendency sometimes to be a little bit overwhelmed until I organize it all. And so that is a weakness, that you can get overwhelmed, but it's also a very big strength that you can handle so many different tasks. So you're seeing how you position these things. And then you kind of have these like to acknowledge here. Then there's, again, be truthful here. That's a big concern. I get it. One of those things I always look for in that product, the quality, the cost, whatever. And now we're talking about, so you're acknowledging that their objection is important. And then, but here's how I deal with that. Here's how we work through that issue. And again, the postponing, sometimes you have to do that. You raise a great objection. That's interesting point of view. I don't have the answer for that. It's going to take me a day or two. I got to get the specifics from my tech group. Can I get back to you in 2 days with that? And then we can talk about that. And then in the meantime, let's talk about these 4 other points that I can handle right here, right now. Is that okay? They might say no. They might. How do you handle that? You might have to say, you know what, I could assume I know that answer for you, but I don't have all the, and I don't want to give you false information. That is, I just don't want to do that. And that could be, and then they could say, yeah, I don't want you to lie to me, make something up. Take your 2 days, work with your tech group, get back to us. If you've already built the relationship in terms of the rapport and the some of the trust, they'll give you the time. But if you're using it to stall because you can't come up with the value of your product or service, they'll see that. Remember, you've got to build the value in their mind. And there still might be issues, and that's okay. You got to work through those. And if the value, right, the value outweigh the cost, you'll have a better chance of making the sale. If the value of you as an employee for them to hire you is high and the cost is equal or less, they'll have a better chance of wanting to bring you into their employment. But if they think, wow, you're way overqualified, you're going to be demanding this amount of money, you're not bringing as much value, they're going to hire you? No, probably not. Um, this is, one of the things that we talk about, selling to groups, group presentations. It's different. It's a little different dynamic, right? So we have to think about, if we're selling to more than one person at the same time, persuading a group of people to buy something, even buy an idea that we have. Here's a couple things to consider. If you get an idea, like whether other buyers share a concern, like there's 5 buyers in the group, and then a person raises an objection, throw it back to the group. Like I threw it back to the class. That's a good point. Somebody's raising this. What other things do we need to consider? And then the group can answer that question. That somebody might have already solved that objective in the group that they're raising. They say, maybe there's people from 5 different departments, and you're selling software for the heads of 5 different departments. Somebody raises, an objection about the complexity of learning the language that your software has, some of the schemes, and you're like, that could be an objection, but you're thinking, okay, Yeah. Anybody here know how to deal with that issue before in implementing software? And the buyer of one of the buyers in a different division says, yeah, we had that before. Here's how we dealt with it. You look masterful, and you've gotten somebody in the company to answer that objection for you. That builds credibility because they already are with the company. Now, any response that you're talking to should be addressed to all the buyers, not just one, right? So if somebody asks a question, you got to think, well, maybe they all have that same question to address them. And then you got to check, make sure that they are satisfied with the answer. Maybe the person you're talking to is satisfied, but there's 3 other people or 4 other people. And maybe one of those now has a question that they want to, it's like, let me ask you about that you raise about the software, the implementation. Now that you mention it, I have a question. If you didn't know, that could be an objection. If you solve that, then you've gotten somebody to add value to your proposal while you're presenting. That's the way it works, right? We build the value while we're presenting. Sure, we've done our homework. Sure, we have all this examples, potential ways that we can handle objections. You get them to answer the objection. Wow. And you're going to get hit with price, right? Always, frequently. We know this. Well, what do we do? We make sure everything is up to date. Maybe they have old data, right? We talk about the value of our product. If they're giving you price objections, they don't see the value. And you're using your tools effectively. You communicate effectively. That's questions, answers, listening, uncovering need, trying to get at the need behind the need. You get at the needs, that might not build enough value. You get the need behind the need, the true need, that builds the most value. Here we go. A couple more and then we'll be done today. Dealing with difficult or tough customers. Dealing with difficult or tough relatives, right? Employees. Think about this. It doesn't have to just be customers. Maintain positive attitude. Again, things may be simple but not easy. If we're trying to maintain a positive attitude, we got to do that work ahead of time, right? Talk about some of these things: sleep, visualizing success, making sure we're in a good frame of mind ahead of time, looking at past successes, being where your feet are. Think about things like that. Breathing, making sure you're well prepared. If you're well prepared, you'll probably have a better attitude going in. And so that's important. You know they're going to be difficult. Do you want to get into being difficult too because they're being difficult? Positive attitude doesn't mean you're always agreeing with them. Positive attitude means you understand that everybody goes through difficult moments. You're more compassionate. You take a step back. You see a larger perspective. Okay, they're being difficult. But maybe, like I said, you don't know. Everybody's going through something. Maybe they're taking care of a sick relative and they got that weighing on them in the decision for your product or service. You being kind to them, if they're difficult, may make all the difference. Treat everybody like they're the most important person, right? When the customer communicates aggressively, because sometimes they do, your product stinks. You have the worst service of any of the competition. Why would I ever want to buy from you? Whoa, we could be real defensive, or we could just like be assertive and confront that issue head on. Sorry you feel that way. Wow. Why do you feel that way? Why do you feel we have well, my competitor that I'm using told me that you did this bad job with one of the other companies and uncovering stuff. And it may not be true. Maybe it is true. Maybe you did do a poor job. But you need to address that head on. Difficult people are difficult people. They're going to bring up difficult objections. They're going to bring up difficult situations for you. Are you going to dance around? Sometimes you could like do an end around, but sometimes it's important to address what's happening. There's an elephant in the room. You address the elephant in the room. Okay. It's important to note that buyer's culture sometimes here is to think about this. They may dictate a specific response to a seller, meaning that they may put you through the hoops of this obstacle course of certain questions and certain things that they're going to try to, they want the best deal for their company. They're going to try to run you around and try to get that. As companies I know, I had a friend that was in the hardware business. He was in high level marketing for Rubbermaid. And Rubbermaid makes a lot of containers, big Rubbermaid tubs, containers, storage uh, units. And they were working with Home Depot. Home Depot, huge store chain of home improvement centers. They run the salespeople crazy. They are very difficult to deal with. They're very tough. They're very, he used to tell me stories. They would make him wait 3 hours. You're supposed to be there at 9 o'clock for a 9 o'clock appointment. You'd be there for 3 hours. Remember, we talked about that. Sometimes it's like, you're busy, but sometimes it's like, I got other stuff to do. I don't want them to take advantage. Some of these orders are so large, people were waiting in there for 3, 4 hours. You said that happened frequently because it's in their culture to wear you down. You kind of think about it sounds like battle strategies in the military with prisoners that are investigating, good cop, bad cop kind of things in the police, law enforcement. Let me wear down the criminal so they divulge some information. Sometimes they're that difficult. Do you have an attitude that can allow you to navigate that? And then think about this. Sometimes customers are difficult because they're really quiet. They do not share a lot with you. They're passive. I have a couple of clients that I work with. They don't like to share a lot about what's happening. And I got to do my job. I'm coaching them on performance and enhancing their ability to play better, do better at their sport. And sometimes they just don't share a lot. Maybe they're young, 13, 14-year-old, you know, they don't share a lot. So I have to be real creative, and I'm kind, I'm open and honest. I have to be real creative with figuring out ways to explain things to them so they share. I had one girl, she wasn't as communicative as I would like, but she was a tremendous drawing. So I would give her a question, something that we were working on, draw me a picture. We'll come back to the next session with that picture. We'll talk about it. Or do a PowerPoint, like she could put things on a computer, like with images and things. And that was a way to kind of break the ice. Yeah, they were more quiet, passive, but all of a sudden I'm appealing to them. They like another person was musical. So we talked about music and how that worked. Um, and that opened up a conversation point. Again, a difficult conversation, a difficult customer could be because, again, they're quiet. So you got to really get asking good questions to get them involved. You got to be even better at gathering data and assessing and make them feel confident enough to ask a question. And that word trust, got to get the trust in. A lot of the coaching work I do is because of the trust relationship. These people, these athletes, these business owners, they come to me because they trust that I can give them information that will be of value to them. They trust that. So they're confident. They can ask me questions about very sensitive topics. So they know that it's confidential and they can trust me. And then you use trial closes as like, does that answer your question? Is your objection fully handled? If, now that that's handled, will you buy my service? Will you use my service? They might back off. They might say, no, not yet. We're still thinking about it. And then there's that whole loop about, okay, delving a little deeper into their objections or need behind the needs. Okay, and I want to point this out. This is in the book too, Exhibit 10.4, common methods for responding. There was, we talked about, I think Exhibit 10.5 had those three charts there, different ways. Just to kind of see, there's always different perspectives. This is what we'll close on this. When there's different perspective, always make sure you're asking questions, gathering data. Never assume you have all the answers. And if a buyer makes a statement that you know is not true, you have to deal with it, but be aware of the different methods. Sometimes direct denial, indirect, maybe direct denial is not the best way to use that. Maybe again, you might really offend them culturally. And again, if buyer raises valid concerns, you could postpone and you could do different things, but just kind of know, again, think ahead of time of common objections and think ahead of time of how you can handle those objections. And that's what we're getting at. And again, a lot of it is preparation, whether it's preparation in the presentation, preparation in the interview, preparation in the sales call, preparation to talk to your boss. Try to get into their head. What might they raise? What is it, the value you're bringing? What is it that you need? What is it that you want? And the value. How are you showing the value? And can you answer some of those objections ahead of time? Write them down on paper if you have to. Really good thing to consider. All right, so that's what I have for you for dealing with difficult people, raising objections, looking at different presentation methods, ways to calm the jitters, right? There's a lot of good stuff here, a lot of good stuff. I want you to start to think about, again, using these skills in your own life. Because this leads to, I'm going to take 5 minutes and then we'll be done for today. So, first thing, we're meeting on Saturday. We're going back to the Saturday schedule for 2 weeks. So I know, so it's a short week. We're actually meeting 2 times, Tuesday, Saturday, and then we'll be again for the next Saturday. So keep that in mind. We're going back to Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. And it's in Microsoft Teams. It's in the calendar, so it's there for you. The assignment. I'll have a new assignment coming up in the next few days, and this is really for you. It's an assignment. Yes, I'll grade it. Yes, it will be part of the grade of the course, but it's really for you. So far, we've covered 10 chapters, lots of topics within each chapter. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll start uncovering a little bit more the selling process and the dynamic, and getting a little more specific, and closing the sale and checking and all that, those things that we need to do to be good salespeople. But what I wanted to ask you to do in this next assignment is, of all the topics we covered so far, I want you to pick out one or two that you could personally use that you may already use. And you're going to talk about those. And in your life, whether it's in your job or it's how you interact with your employees, your colleagues, it could be making a presentation. It could be being adaptive selling or adaptive communicating, adaptive, style. It could be asking questions, listening. It could be any of the topics we covered. I want you literally, and this will be done in 3 or 4 pages, double space. Take 2, 3 at most of the most important topics that you've learned in this class so far, or those that we have yet to learn that you already know. Again, we'll be covering in the next couple of weeks some more topics. And then you're going to write about why those are important to you and how you use them in your day-to-day life. It's a little more open-ended because I'm allowing you to kind of pick the topic within the practice of the selling process. So that will be your assignment. I'll write it up very clearly. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that's coming. And I'll give you probably 3.5 weeks to complete it. So it will be due like the beginning of April. All right. So you have maybe 3 weeks to complete it, a little extra time. Um, and there'll be a quiz from a very short quiz from chapter 10. We'll be talking about the next chapter 11 that will be up on Saturday. But that's all I have for you. So, like I said, I mean, it's been a privilege to be teaching this class with you. I learn a lot. I thank you for those that have shared in the chat about your experiences. Keep doing that, because again, I want you to make this class very applicable to your life, in your business, in your personal life, and how you're interacting as a salesperson. Thank you, Samya. And that's what it's about, right? It's not just learning stuff out of a book. Again, you could do that on your own. I want to make sure that you're able to apply this in how you interact with the people in your lives. Okay? So good. I will see everybody here on Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern. And that's all. Okay. Have a great rest of your day, evening. Thank you. And we'll see you all here on Saturday. Okay. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye for
Professor. Have
now.
a great day.
So,
Bye.
thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye bye. Thank you.